Bari. Listen is the capital city of the province of Bari and of the Apulia region, on the Adriatic Sea, in Italy. It is the second most important economic centre of mainland southern Italy after Naples, and is well known as a port and university city, as well as the city of St. Nicholas. The city itself has a population of about 320,475, as of 2011, over 116 square kilometers, while the fast-growing urban area counts 653,028 inhabitants over 203 square kilometers. The metropolitan area counts 1 million inhabitants. Bari is made up of 4 different urban sections. To the north is the closely built Old Town on the peninsula between 2 modern harbours, with the Basilica of St. Nicholas, the Cathedral of San Sabino and the Hohenstaufen Castle built for Frederick II, which is now also a major nightlife district. To the south is the Maurette Quarter, the modern heart of the city, which is laid out on a rectangular grid plan with a promenade on the sea and the major shopping district. Modern residential zones surround the center of Bari, the result of chaotic development during the 1960s and 1970s, replacing the old suburbs that had developed along roads splaying outwards from gates in the city walls. In addition, the outer suburbs have developed rapidly during the 1990s. The city has a redeveloped airport named after Pope John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła Airport, with connections to several European cities. History. Ancient. The city was probably founded by the Pustii. Once it passed under Roman rule in the 3rd century BC. It developed strategic significance as the point of junction between the coast road and the Via Traiana and as a port for eastward trade. A branch road to Tarentum led from Barium. Its harbour, mentioned as early as 181 BC, was probably the principal one of the districts in ancient times, as it is at present, and was the centre of a fishery. The first historical bishop of Bari was Gervasius, who was noted at the Council of Sardica in 347. The bishops were dependent on the Patriarch of Constantinople until the 10th century. Middle Ages. After the devastations of the Gothic Wars, under Lombard rule a set of written regulations was established, the Consuetudines Barenses, which influenced similar written constitutions in other southern cities. Until the arrival of the Normans, Bari continued to be governed by the Byzantines, with only occasional interruption. Throughout this period, and indeed throughout the Middle Ages, Bari served as one of the major slave depots of the Mediterranean, providing a central location for the trade in Slavic slaves. The slaves were mostly captured by Venice from Dalmatia, the Holy Roman Empire from what is now Prussia and Poland, and the Byzantines from elsewhere in the Balkans, and were generally destined for other parts of the Byzantine Empire and the Muslim states surrounding the Mediterranean. The Abbasid Caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate of Córdoba, the Emirate of Sicily, and the Fatimid Caliphate. For 20 years, Bari was the center of the Emirate of Bari. The city was captured by its first emirs Khalfan in 847, who had been part of the mercenary garrison installed there by Radelchis I of Benevento. The city was conquered and the emirate extinguished in 871, due to the efforts of Emperor Louis II and a Byzantine fleet. Chris Wickham states Louis spent 5 years campaigning to reduce then occupy Bari, and then only to a Byzantine, Slav naval blockade. Louis took the credit for the success, adding, at least in Frankish eyes, then concludes by noting that by remaining in southern Italy long after this success, he achieved the near impossible, an alliance against him of the Beneventans, Salernitans, Neapolitans and Spolitans. Later sources include Swabian as well. In 885, Bari became the residence of the local Byzantine Catapan, or governor. The failed revolt of the Lombard nobles Melis of Bari and his brother-in-law Datus, against the Byzantine governorate, though it was firmly repressed at the Battle of Cannae, offered their Norman adventurer allies a first foothold in the region. In 1025, under the Archbishop Byzantius, Bari became attached to the See of Rome and was granted provincial status. In 1071, Bari was captured by Robert Guiscard, following a 3-year siege. Mayo of Bari, a Lombard merchant's son, was the third of the great admirals of Norman Sicily. The Basilica di San Nicola was founded in 1087 to receive the relics of this saint, which were surreptitiously brought from Myra in Lycia, in Byzantine territory. The saint began his development from St. Nicholas of Myra into St. Nicholas of Bari and began to attract pilgrims, whose encouragement and care became central to the economy of Bari. In 1095, Peter the Hermit preached the first crusade there. In October 1098, Urban II, who had consecrated the basilica in 1089, convened the Council of Bari, one of a series of synods convoked with the intention of reconciling the Greeks and Latins on the question of the Filioque clause in the Creed, which Anselm ably defended, seated at the Pope's side. The Greeks were not brought over to the Latin way of thinking, and the Great Schism was inevitable. A civil war broke out in Bari in 1117 with the murder of the Archbishop Riso. Control of Bari was seized by Grimwald Olfranites, a native Lombard, and he was elected lord in opposition to the Normans. By 1123, he had increased ties with Byzantium and Venice and taken the title Gratia Dei Beata Nicolae Barensis Princeps. Grimwald increased the cult of St. Nicholas in his city. He later did homage to Roger II of Sicily, but rebelled and was defeated in 1132. Bari was occupied by Manuel I Komnenos between 1155 and 1158. In 1246, Bari was sacked and razed to the ground. Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Sicily, repaired the fortress of Bari, but it was subsequently destroyed several times. Bari recovered each time. Early modern period Isabella di Aragona, Princess of Naples and widow of the Duke of Milan Giangalliazzo Sforza, enlarged the castle, which she made her residence, 1499 to 1524. After the death of Bona Sforza, Queen of Poland, Bari came to be included in the Kingdom of Naples and its history contracted to a local one, as malaria became endemic in the region. Bari was awakened from its provincial somnolence by Napoleon's brother-in-law Joachim Murat. As Napoleonic King of Naples, Murat ordered the building in 1808 of a new section of the city, laid out on a rational grid plan, which bears his name today as the Muratiano. Under this stimulus, Bari developed into the most important port city of the region. The legacy of Mussolini can be seen in the imposing architecture along the seafront. World War II. On the 11th of September 1943, in connection with the Armistice of Cassibile, Bari was taken without resistance by the British 1st Airborne Division. The Balkan Air Force supporting the Yugoslav partisans was based at Bari. The 1943 chemical warfare disaster, through a tragic coincidence intended by neither of the opposing sides in World War II, Bari gained the unwelcome distinction of being the only European city to experience chemical warfare in the course of that war. On the night of December 2, 1943, 105 German Junkers Ju-88 bombers attacked the port of Bari, which was a key supply center for Allied forces fighting their way up the Italian peninsula. Over 20 Allied ships were sunk in the overcrowded harbor, including the U.S. Liberty ship John Harvey, which was carrying mustard gas. Mustard gas was also reported to have been stacked on the quayside awaiting transport. The presence of the gas was highly classified, and authorities ashore had no knowledge of it. This increased the number of fatalities, since physicians, who had no idea that they were dealing with the effects of mustard gas, prescribed treatment proper for those suffering from exposure and immersion, which proved fatal in many cases, because rescuers were unaware they were dealing with gas casualties. Many additional casualties were caused among the rescuers through contact with the contaminated skin and clothing of those more directly exposed to the gas. Following the attack, the harbor was closed for operations for 3 weeks. It did not return to full capacity until February 1944. A member of U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower's medical staff, Stuart F. Alexander, was dispatched to Bari following the raid. Alexander had trained at the Army's Edgewood Arsenal in New Jersey. Please check this reference. The link identifies the Edgewood Arsenal as part of the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, and was familiar with some of the effects of mustard, although he was not informed of the cargo carried by the John Harvey. And most victims suffered atypical symptoms caused by exposure to mustard diluted in water and oil. Alexander rapidly concluded that mustard was present, although he could not get any acknowledgement from the chain of command. Alexander convinced medical staffs to treat patients for mustard exposure and saved many lives as a result. He also preserved many tissue samples from autopsied victims at Bari. After World War II, these samples would result in the development of an early form of chemotherapy based on mustard, mustine. On the orders of Allied leaders Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill and Eisenhower, records were destroyed and the whole affair was kept secret for many years after the war. The U.S. records of the attack were declassified in 1959, but the episode remained obscure until 1967, when writer Glenn B. Infield exposed the story in his book Disaster at Bari. Additionally, there is considerable dispute as to the number of fatalities. In one account, 69 deaths were attributed in whole or in part to the mustard gas, most of them American merchant seamen. Others put the count as high as more than 1,000 Allied servicemen and more than 1,000 Italian civilians. Part of the confusion and controversy derives from the fact that the German attack, which became nicknamed the Little Pearl Harbor, after the Japanese air attack on the American naval base in Hawaii, was highly destructive and lethal in itself, apart from the effects of the gas. Attribution of the causes of death to the gas, as distinct from the direct effects of the German attack, has proved far from easy. The affair is the subject of 2 books, Disaster at Bari, by Glenn B. Infield, and Nightmare in Bari, The World War II Liberty Ship Poison Gas Disaster and Cover-Up, by Gerald Remenuk. In 1988, through the efforts of Nick T. Spark, U.S. Senator Dennis D. Kucinich and U.S. Senator Bill Bradley, Dr. Stuart Alexander received recognition from the Surgeon General of the United States Army for his actions during the Bari disaster. Charles Henderson explosion. The port of Bari was again struck by disaster on the 9th of April 1945 when the Liberty ship Charles Henderson exploded in the harbor while offloading 2,000 tons of aerial bombs. 360 people were killed, 1730 were wounded. The harbor was again rendered non-operational, this time for a month. Language. Bari, while today an industrialized port and university city, still maintains strong traditions based on its patron Saint Nicholas. Bari is known throughout Italy for its unique, often crude, spoken dialect, particularly in the Old Town, parts of which originated from a pidgin between Italian and Greek fishermen in the past, and which fishermen in Greece can still understand today. Main sites. Basilica of St. Nicholas. The Basilica di San Nicola was founded in 1087 to receive the relics of this saint, which were brought from Myra in Lycia, and now lie beneath the altar in the crypt, where are buried the topins, which are a legacy of old thieves converted to good faith. The church is one of the 4 Palatine churches of Apulia. Bari Cathedral, dedicated to Saint Sabinus of Canossa, was begun in Byzantine style in 1034, but was destroyed in the sack of the city of 1156. A new building was thus built between 1170 and 1178, partially inspired by that of San Nicola. Of the original edifice, only traces of the pavement are today visible in the transept. an important example of Apulian Romanesque architecture. The church has a simple Romanesque facade with 3 portals. In the upper part is a rose window decorated with monstrous and fantasy figures. The interior has a nave and 2 aisles, divided by 16 columns with arcades. The crypt houses the relics of Saints Sabinus and the icon of the Madonna Odigitria. The interior and the facade were redecorated in Baroque style during the 18th century, but these additions were removed in a 1950s restoration. Petruzelli Theater. The Petruzelli Theater is one of the most important opera houses in Italy after La Scala in Milan and the San Carlo Theater in Naples. It saw many famous opera and ballet celebrities throughout the 20th century, but it was all but destroyed in a fire on October 27, 1991. The theatre was reopened in October 2009, after 18 years. Swabian Castle. The Norman Hohenstaufen Castle, widely known as the Castello Svevo, was built by Roger II of Sicily around 1131. Destroyed in 1156, it was rebuilt by Frederick II of Hohenstaufen. The castle now serves as a gallery for a variety of temporary exhibitions in the city. Pinacoteca Provinciale di Bari. The Pinacoteca Provinciale di Bari is the most important art gallery in Apulia. It was first established in 1928 and contains many important paintings from the 15th century up to the days of contemporary art. The Russian Church, in the Carissa district of Bari, was built in the early 20th century to welcome Russian pilgrims who came to the city to visit the Church of St. Nicholas in the Old City, where the relics of the saint remain. Built on a large area of council-owned land, the city council and Italian national government were recently involved in a trade-off with the Putin government in Moscow, exchanging the piece of land on which the church stands, for, albeit indirectly, a military barracks near Bari's central railway station. The handover was seen as building bridges between the Catholic and Russian Orthodox churches. Baravecchia was until fairly recently considered a no-go area by many of Bari's residents due to the high levels of petty crime. A large-scale redevelopment plan, begun with a new sewerage system and followed by the development of the 2 main squares, Piazza Mercantile and Piazza Ferraris, has seen the opening of many pubs and other venues. This has been welcomed by many who claim that the social life of the city, and in particular the experience for tourists in Bari, has been improved and that jobs and revenue have been created. Others point out the effects of late-night noise in the enclosed squares and criticize development based mainly on pubs and other such premises. A popular and ironic way of saying is Sciaparigi avversarial mare, Sara Buna Piccole Bari. Other Teatro Petruzelli, Teatro Margherita, Teatro Piccini, Orto Botanico dell'Università di Bari, a botanical garden. Santa Chiara, once Church of the Teutonic Knights and now houses a museum. It was restored in 1539. The build of Acquedotta Pugliese, the medieval church of San Marco dei Veneziani, with a notable rose window in the facade. Conservatory of Bari, San Giorgio degli Armeni, Santa Teresa dei Imisci, the main Baroque church in the city. Penne. Pomodoro Beach is the main beach within reach of the city. Its reputation has for several years suffered from the apparent presence of asbestos from nearby industrial plants. The eastern seafront skyline of Bari had, until spring 2006, been dominated by the monstrous apartment complex known as Punta Perotti, a creation of the Mataris construction empire, clearly in violation of several fundamental Italian building regulations. Punta Perotti became the focus of a political and environmental movement calling for its demolition. After years of legal wrangling between the Mataris firm, Bari Council and environmental groups such as Save the Earth, the court ruled in favor of its demolition, and thousands gathered on the Bari seafront in April 2006 to see the event. The grid-shaped Maurette city centre of Bari is said to be the largest shopping centre in all of Italy and contains a large number of high street stores and smaller shops with particular attention to high fashion and tailoring. Bari has recently seen a proliferation of out-of-town hypermarkets with all manner of shops and superstores attached to them. Bari features two sea harbours, the Old Port as well as the New Port. The latter was constructed in 1850 and can accommodate any kind of ship, including large cargo-laden vessels. Geography. Bari is located on the Adriatic coastline, of which it is the largest urban and metro area. It is located in southern Italy, but at a more northerly latitude than Naples, but further south than Rome. Quarters shown above are the 20 quarters of Bari. These 20 neighborhoods, or quartier, as they are known, are further divided into 9 governmental community boards. Climate. Bari enjoys a Mediterranean climate with mild winters and hot, dry summers. Tierra del Levante. The Tierra del Levante is said to be the largest trade fair in the Adriatic and involves exhibitions from many sectors and industries. Held in September in the Fiera site on the west side of Bari city centre, the Fiera attracts many exhibitors from Italy, around the Mediterranean. Its trade corridors to the east and beyond, mainly focused on agriculture and industry. There are also stalls, exhibitions and presentations by a wide variety of companies and organizations in many fields. There is also a Fair of Nations, which displays handcrafted and locally produced goods from all over the world. This year's Fiera also saw an expo fishing, which brought together to fishing methods, tackle and know-how from across the Mediterranean.